Good evening, everybody. I hope you are well. And I hope... Excuse me. I'm doing a little bit of stream maintenance because sometimes we need to do that. Now, you may have noticed, first a public notice, so to speak. You may have noticed that this is the fifth part that we're playing, and the first part, no, not the first part. I've been jumping back and forth between hosts a little bit, and what I'm going to do, simply put, is that I'm going to use YouTube for archive purposes. So if you prefer to watch or listen to this kind of stuff through YouTube, you can do that as well. And there is a YouTube, there will be a YouTube link in the sort of comments section, or in the link description for this, so you can go there also. But for these purposes, I'm using Facebook Live because it's simply put just easier to live stream to people I know using Facebook. It seems to grab more attention. Also, I'm trying out a new method now, so if the video is lagging horribly, I would very much appreciate somebody telling me in the chat. If it's fine, I would also like you to tell me, just so I know if this works or not, more or less. So I see I have 3 people watching this right now. So you who are watching, am I syncing, or is the video horribly laggy? The video doesn't really matter, but it's a technical thing. It should work properly. And we'll start in just a minute. I'm sorry you have to listen to me type. We'll stop with that and start reading it again. Writing a little comment there. Somebody needs to tell me if the video is not working. I can't see that for myself. Not that it matters that much. But then again, it should be correct. We're waiting for a very special guest, actually. So we'll just wait a minute and see if he manages to join us. So I hope you've all been doing well. I'm doing rather well. We're having I'm not saying we're having. It is I have 2 days left before Christmas vacation, and I've got a pretty good solid Christmas feeling, you know, for once. I mean, that hasn't happened in years. So I have to say, reading Dickens and just having this little routine has really paid off in a way that I didn't quite expect it to. And there are, of course, other factors, such as having a badass Lucia concert with the ever awesome Gudrun Choir. no doubt had something to do with it. I think it actually had most to do with it of anything. But this little reading session has also been the thing that has made the dark evenings seem a little bit brighter. Okay, I'm not seeing any objections about the quality of video or the frame rate, which is hopefully a good sign. Again, there is a comments section, so you can write things, and if there is technical problems, I need you to tell me, for I cannot see them myself right now. Yes, well. And we have our final guest. We're just sitting here in silence now. Don't get too bored. Don't get too bored. We'll get there. In the archive copy I will save to YouTube, I will see if I can cut this opening stuff out. Because it's not really, I'm supposed to launch right into it, and today was sort of an exception. This is not how we do it, people. We are not supposed to do this. I am making an exception for a certain individual. He knows who he is. And, yeah, there you go. I'm making an exception for a certain individual. He knows who he is, who has apparently sold his soul to the devil in order to watch or listen to this stream. So I think that actually deserves a little bit of, recognition. He hates Facebook. Anyway. Okay. Let's start reading. Now, last time we left off, we were discussing, or rather reading about Scrooge's meeting with, we presume, an old sweetheart of his, and I'll get right back into it. Scrooge was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she resumed. You may, the memory of what is past half makes me hope you will, have pain in this, a very, very brief time, you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly, as in an unprofitable dream from which it happened well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen. She left him, and they parted. Spirit, said Scrooge, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me so? One shadow more, exclaimed the ghost. No more, cried the Scrooge. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more. But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room, not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there was more children than than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count, and unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, they were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but every child was conducting itself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much, and the latter, soon beginning to mingle in the sports, got pillaged by the young brigands most ruthlessly. What would I have not given to be one of them? Though I never could have been so rude. No. I wouldn't for the wealth of all of the world have crushed that braided hair and torn it down. And for the precious little shoe, I wouldn't have plucked it off. God bless my soul, to save my life. As to measuring her waist in sport, as they did, bold young brood, I couldn't have done it. I should have expected my arm to have grown round it for a punishment, and never come straight again. And yet I should have dearly liked, I own this, to have touched her lips, to have questioned her, that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes, and never raised a blush, to have let loose waves of hair, an inch of which would be a keepsake beyond price. In short, I should have liked, I do confess, to have had the lightest license of a child, and yet to have been man enough to know its value. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she, with laughing face and plundered dress, was borne toward it, in the center of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home, attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and the struggling and the onslaught that was made on the defenseless porter, the scaling him with chairs for ladders, to dive into his pockets, despoil him of brown paper parcels, hold on tight by his cravat, hug him round the neck, pummel his back, and kick his legs in irrepressible affection. The shouts of wonder and delight with which development of every package was received, the terrible announcement that the baby had been taken in the act of putting a doll's frying pan into his mouth, and was more than suspected of having swallowed a fictitious turkey glued on a wooden platter. The immense relief of finding that this was a false alarm. The joy, the gratitude, the ecstasy, they are all indescribably alike. It is enough that, by degrees, the children and their motions got out of the parlor, and by one stair at a time, up to the top of the house, where they went to bed, and so subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever, when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. "Belle," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon." "Oh, who was it? Guess." "How can I? Tut, don't I know?" she added in the same breath, laughing as he laughed. "Mr. Scrooge." Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up, and he had a candle inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone. Quite alone in the world, I do believe. "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you, these were the shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "That they are what they are, do not blame me." "Remove me," said Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which, in some strange way, there were fragments of all of the faces it had shown him, wrestled with it. "Leave me, take me back, haunt me no longer." In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguished cap and by a sudden action pressed it down upon his head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form, but though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. That is the end of Chapter 2, and we will begin on Chapter 3 for a few pages. Chapter 3, the second of the three spirits. Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time, for the especial purpose of holding a conference with a second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But, finding that he had turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains this new spectre would draw back, he put them every one aside with his own hands, and lying down again, established a sharp lookout all around the bed, for he wished to challenge the spirit on this moment, nay, on the very moment of its appearance, and did not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Gentlemen of the free and easy sort, who plume themselves on being acquainted with a move or two, and being usually equal to the time of day, express the wide range of their capacity for adventure by observing that they are good for anything from pitch and toss to manslaughter, between which opposite extremes, no doubt, there lies a tolerably wide and comprehensive range of subjects. Without venturing for Scrooge quite as hardly as this, I don't mind calling on you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, and that nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, and yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light, which streamed upon it when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant or would be at, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be at that very moment an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you or I would have thought at first, for it is always the person not in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done in it, and would unquestionably have done it too. At least, I say, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. He obeyed. It was his own room, after all. There was no doubt about it. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked like a perfect grove, from every part of which bright, gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up, The chimney, that dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's for that matter. Heaped up on the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense 12-cake, and seething bowls of punch, so much that it made the chamber dim in their delicious steam. An easy estate upon this couch of food, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape, not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. "Ah, come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in, and know me better, man!" Scrooge entered timidly, and hung his head before the spirit. He was not the dogged Scrooge he had been, and though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he didn't like to meet them. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple deep green robe or mantle, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by an artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "You have never seen the like of me before?" exclaimed the spirit. "No, never," Scrooge made an answer to it. "Have never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers born in these later years?" pursued the phantom. No, I don't think I have," said Scrooge. "I'm afraid I have not. Have you many brothers, spirit?" More than 1,800, said the ghost. "A tremendous family to provide for," muttered Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas present rose. "Spirit," said Scrooge submissively, "conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it." Cat mistakes are happening. Clumsy, clumsy cat. It's always something, isn't there? "Touch my robe," instructed the ghost. Scrooge did as he was told, and held it fast. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, meat, pigs, sausages, oysters, pies, puddings, fruit, and punch. They all vanished instantly, and so did the room, and the fire, and the ruddy glow, the hour of the night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where, for the weather was severe, the people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music, in scraping the snows from the pavement in front of their dwellings, and from the tops of their houses, whence it was mad delight to the boys to see it come plumbing down into the road below, and splitting into artificial little snowstorms. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs, and with the dirtier snow upon the ground, which last deposit had been plowed up in deep furrows by the heavy wheels of carts and wagons, furrows that crossed and recrossed each other 100 times where the great streets branched off, making intricate channels, hard to trace in the thick yellow mud and icy water. And with that, we'll break for tonight. I hope you enjoyed, as always, this reading of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And, as always, at least until the end of the book, I will see you again tomorrow night. Sleep tight.